So the Apostle Paul is saying we have been called to liberty. What kind of liberty? We have been called to a liberty where we don't have to try to impress God, and we don't have to try to keep the law in our own strength to gain salvation for ourselves. We don't have to obey the law to go to heaven. He said that we have been set free from the law. We have been set free from the written law, but he's saying don't use this freedom. Don't use this liberty from the law to live in the flesh, to live in your own life, to live in your own desires. But what should you do? But by love serve one another. And then he says, for all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. So at the beginning of the chapter he says, you don't need to fulfill the law to be saved, and you have been set free from the law, and we don't have to obey the law. And then he says, obey the law. How? Not through the written law, but through love and through the Holy Spirit. That's what he says. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. He's saying love one another. But if you bite each other and you devour each other, take heed that you don't consume one another, that you don't destroy one another with the sinful actions that you are committing. And then he says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to another, that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under the law. Very important to understand this verse. He's saying we are free from the law, and we don't need to be in bondage under the law anymore. And then he says we don't need to use this freedom from the law to live in the flesh, but we need to love one another. But how do we love one another? Where do we find this love for one another? This is where he says, this I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. So how do we love one another? How do we be set free from the flesh, from the sinful desires that we have a desire to commit? How do we be set free from this sinful nature that we have? We need to walk in the Spirit. And when we walk in the Spirit, we will not fulfill the desires of the flesh. But why am I fulfilling the desires of the flesh? I am fulfilling the desires of the flesh because I am not walking in the Spirit. This I say then, walk in the Spirit, and ye shall not fulfill the lust of the flesh. For the flesh lusteth against the Spirit, and the Spirit against the flesh. And these are contrary the one to another, that ye cannot do the things that ye would. But if ye be led of the Spirit, ye are not under law. So there's two kinds of people. There's one person who lives under the law, a person who lives by commandments and by a written law, and he's always trying to fulfill the law through his own strength and through his own power. And then there's a different person, a person who lives in the Spirit, a person who is led of the Holy Spirit, a person who walks by love. The person under the law doesn't steal, the person walking in the Spirit doesn't steal. The person under the law doesn't lie, the person walking in the Spirit doesn't lie. Outwardly, they look very similar and identical because he keeps the law and the spiritual man keeps the law, but he keeps the law through his own strength and through his own power by trying to force himself to be good. He wants to go and commit sin, but he's trying to force himself not to commit sin. The other person is walking in the Spirit and he has no desire to go and commit sin because he is filled with God's Holy Spirit. He is filled with God's love. And love does not want to do bad to somebody else. Love does not want to commit sin. Love will fulfill the law. So there's two different people. There's the person under the law of the written law, the law that was written upon stone and paper, and there's the one who is under the new law. The new law is a person, Jesus Christ. He himself is the law. God is love. And he that dwelleth in God and God in him. So love is not only a feeling, love is a person, God. And God lives inside of you through the Holy Spirit. You don't need some book or some commandment to tell you what to do. You have the Holy Spirit inside of you, and you have God's love to tell you what to do. You don't need to tell Jesus, don't go and steal, don't go and lie, don't go and kill, don't go and do these things. He had no desire to go and commit these actions because he was filled with God's love. He was filled with God's Holy Spirit. But if you already have a desire to go and commit sin, it shows that there is something wrong with your relationship with God. A person who walks in the Spirit will not have a desire to go in and commit sin at that moment when he is in the Holy Spirit. When we are close to God, we have different desires. We have desires to serve God. We have desires to love other people. We have desires to be holy, to be separated from sin. But then we get distracted and we separate ourselves from God's Spirit, and the flesh begins to awaken inside of us, and the sinful desires of the flesh begin to awaken, and we are drawn away from God by our own lust.